So at the end of last year, I was made aware of the first ever Flat Earth conference.
We're not crazy! Some of us are just nuts!
I'll be honest here, I would love to go to one of these just to see how ridiculous it can actually be. And I think it would overall be an interesting and fun experience. You got some cool looking Flat Earth models, books, t-shirts. I would buy them all.
I don't need you to believe me, I'm just here to plant the seed that the grand global conspiracy is that the Earth's flat.
But yeah, this leads me to my topic today, Flat Earth. Ooh, I haven't done a Flat Earth video in a hot minute. Most of the video requests you guys send me are Flat Earth videos, so needless to say I didn't have a shortage of videos to make. I went through your recommendations and picked out a video I thought would be fun to respond to. And by fun, I mean absolutely agonizing.
Hi, my name's Andrew, and I love God. I'm a born-again man who has the Spirit of God.
You know, all the Flat Earthers I've encountered on YouTube have all been religious. And not just any religion, they're Christian. And they're also creationists. I mean, obviously, if you think the Earth is flat, you probably wouldn't think the universe is 13.7 billion years old either. The entire field of astrophysics just wouldn't really matter in a Flat Earther's point of view. It's so interesting how pseudoscience and conspiracy theories can really fit together most of the time to create a nice little bundle of nonsense. But yeah, I've yet to see a non-religious Flat Earther. Not saying they don't exist, I just haven't seen one yet.
I don't like labels, but I must say that in 2016, I became a biblical Flat Earther. Make no mistake, you must research something is Flat Earth on your own, and I'd love for you to learn the top 5 reasons why I became a biblical Flat Earther in 2016.
Okay, so his video has a decent length to it, so I'm going to respond to a short segment to each of his 5 arguments. I may not get to go through all his points, so if you're curious, the link is always in the description to the original video.
Here's the top 5 reasons that I no longer believe in the global Earth in 2016. Number 1. Space is fake. Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay, so you show an image of a studio filming the moon landing, but you don't really talk too much about it. You know, I was requested by some to actually talk about people who think the moon landing was fake, and decided it wasn't that important of a topic. If you guys want to know why it wasn't fake, To Adam Ruins Everything did a pretty good video explaining it. The strongest point he made was that the light rays are parallel and can be seen from the parallel shadows. See, the sun is big but far away. Any light that reaches the moon is essentially parallel, which is something I've mentioned multiple times in previous videos. Back in 1969, studios didn't have the lights that could produce these parallel shadows. Light sources that are close by would produce diverging rays, thus diverging shadows. Now yes, there are plenty of other arguments from the conspiracy theorists, such as the crosshairs being in the wrong place, no stars being in the sky, hot spots, etc. A lot of these are pretty outrageous, but I won't go through them today.
Did you know that there is no real true photo of the Earth from space? We're taught that these images are, but even NASA themselves openly admit that all these images are done in Photoshop. They are composite computer-generated images.
Yes, indeed, a lot of these are indeed computer generated, but they have to be. It's difficult to get a satellite high enough to have an entire view of the Earth. So essentially, NASA just has bits and pieces to work with, which they then must use to compile the Earth together. But that doesn't mean all the images we have are compiled together. There's a photo called the Blue Marble, which is taken by the Apollo 17 crew in 1972 while traveling towards the moon. That is a full image. So if you don't mind, let's just refer to this image from now on whenever this nonsense is brought up again.
Footage from the ISS is easily faked using a green screen and what is known as a zero-G plane, as I'm sure of other methods as well. The plane flies high up in the air and then does a basic nosedive, producing an environment where everything is just in free fall. We can see here that this woman seems a little bit on edge and is clearly feeling unsafe, as I imagine most would in a plane that's in a free fall.
When astronauts are in space, they are actually just falling. Vehicles in space are in orbit, so they are circling around the Earth. Gravity is constantly pulling them in, but due to their horizontal velocity, they can essentially keep moving along the orbit of the Earth without actually being sucked in. But this means that the astronauts are just in free fall the entire time, so it could appear similar to if they were just free falling in, let's say, a nose-diving plane. Future astronauts are required to experience free-falling planes as part of their training. If you're wondering about if gravity has the same force, astronauts in space would actually still experience about 90% of the gravitational force compared to if they were on the surface of the Earth. There's a whole calculation process to this, but I doubt you want to hear that. Anyway, back to the main topic. I will actually applaud you for being able to think of this accusation of everything being filmed in freefall. This is much better than every other argument I've heard, such as it being filmed underwater. Get the fuck out of here. So yeah, how do we disprove this claim? That's pretty easy. So the planes we use to train astronauts are called reduced gravity aircrafts, and like I mentioned earlier, these free-falling planes are used to train future astronauts. What they do is that they accelerate up and then nosedive down. However, each session can only last to about 30 seconds, after which the plane must then increase its altitude for the next dive, which means if we see a clip of an astronaut talk in space for more than 30 seconds, the flat earther's claim is instantly debunked. Of course, that would mean no cuts to the video either.
CBS, The Talk. This is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Number 2. There is no curve. Last time I checked, a ball shape has to have a curve somewhere. But in fact, once you truly look, you will find none. Anywhere. There's none. The proof of this is in objects that can be seen from certain distances over water.
Okay, so he goes on for quite a while giving various examples of buildings or objects that shouldn't be able to be seen if the curvature existed. I've debunked this multiple times in my previous videos, so I'm not very interested in doing that again. However, I would like to direct you guys to Heath's channel. He made an entire video where he explains why the flat earthers' claims are bullshit. I'm not going to play any of his clips here, but the full video will be in the description for anyone who is interested.
Number 3. No movement.
So for this next part, we have a very special guest. Godless Engineer. Unlike me, he actually has some understanding of physics, so I'm going to let him take over for point number 3.
Hey, what's up, Professor Stick? And thank you for having me here on your video. I hope that I can provide some good information to refute this point number 3. So first off, we want to know why we don't feel the Earth moving or anything like that. To be more specific, we want to know why we don't feel the acceleration or the deceleration of movement, because that's what we really feel is the changes in motion. So gravity is the best reason that I can give you for this, because gravity holds us onto the Earth and kind of makes us part of this object that we know, the Earth. Think of a car. Now, when you're in a car and it starts going, the car is actually pushing you at the same speed that it's going. That's why you feel that little bit of pressure on your back as this car starts to go. It's also why seatbelts are very important. If we didn't have seatbelts to further make us part of the car so that when the car slows down, we slow down, if we didn't have that seatbelt, we would just keep going. That's why accidents happen. That's why people get thrown through windshields and everything like that. Basically, the car decelerates so quickly and you just keep on going. Apply that same kind of idea to the Earth stopping and you kind of get where I'm going. We don't feel the Earth actively moving or rotating or anything like that because we are part of the Earth object because of gravity. Now, if you get higher up in the atmosphere, you can actually see the Earth turning underneath you. And the higher you go, the greater that delta or that change is. Now, there are several ways that we can know that the Earth is actually moving. As far as our local solar system goes and our Earth rotating, we can tell by the stars in the sky and the sun and the moon. Now, a flat earther would look at these things and be like, nope, that means that those things are moving and not us. But if you take into consideration how we know planets and galaxies and everything like that to move, that just doesn't make sense. In order for the Earth to not be moving and everything else to move, we would have to change everything that we know about reality. Math equations would get 10 times more complicated in order to compensate for different things. Cats and dogs would start sleeping with each other and producing human cat babies. It would be chaotic.
Movement of the Earth, whether it is the 1,000-mile-per-hour spin, wobble on its axis, or the blindingly fast speeds it's going around the sun or moving through the Milky Way, they are never observed, felt, or even recorded ever in history. It's never been measured or have been found to move, and just speculated in theories. It's perfectly still, and we can prove this using science and repeatable experiments.
While true, for the longest time, we didn't know exactly how our planet and our sun and our local group actually moved through the universe. But since the discovery of the cosmic microwave background radiation, we've been able to measure how fast we are actually moving. We find that we're actually moving at about 368 kilometers per second, plus or minus 30 kilometers a second. This is confirmed by the measurements from the cosmic microwave background radiation. It's usually hotter in the direction that we're moving and cooler or bluer in the direction that we're moving away from. The rest frame of the cosmic microwave background radiation also coincides with the Hubble expansion of the universe. So every galaxy that we know of or can see or conceive has a thing called peculiar velocity, which that is the speed on top of the Hubble expansion. And this peculiar velocity can have values that range from a few hundred to a few thousand of kilometers a second. For instance, our local group travels at about 627 kilometers a second. And of course, all of this matches up with how we understand galaxies to move through the universe. To say that they moved in a different way would be to alter reality in some fashion. And there's an effect called the dipole repeller that can actually explain why we do move through the universe like we do. So we do have explanations for all of this. We can explain every facet in which you have a problem. I think the issue, though, is between the ears and not like in actual science.
The gyroscope is an instrument that will retain its rigidity in space and should appear to turn if the surface it is on is rotating, such as the Earth should. So in fact, if the Earth were spinning at all, we would notice this movement in the gyroscope. However, we can see that we observe no motion. We are perfectly still and going nowhere.
Actually, that's not at all what that should indicate. Because of the size of the gyroscope you're using, you would not see any kind of change, because it's not big enough for it to actually show the change that's happening. I'm fairly certain that if you had a gyroscope as big as the model that you just showed, then we would be able to see the exact same results. But the fact is that we don't, and you didn't show that.
The Michelson-Morley experiment also found this as well. When the experiment found out that the Earth was not spinning,
actually, the way that you formed this is very disingenuous, because that's not at all what the Michelson-Morley experiment actually showed. That experiment was looking to do was to either prove or disprove that an ether existed. Now, ether was named after the Greek god of light, because the scientists and the general community at the time felt that light needed a substance to move through it. They thought logically if sound needed a medium to move through it, like air or water, then light would need the same kind of medium. So they set up an experiment like you've shown here, and they wanted to test to see if this ether was there. They would do it by testing to see if there was like this wind that would shift the light. And obviously that didn't happen. And yes, this did lead to Einstein's theories of relativity. But it was because this experiment failed that we developed the theory of relativity. It's not that the experiment succeeded in any way. I mean, I guess you could say that it succeeded in the fact that it revealed to us more truth about our reality, but it didn't succeed in proving that we weren't spinning. All it did was prove that there was no ether that light moves through.
along comes Einstein to the rescue to make up his theory of relativity, which is just a theory and has never been fully proven.
So this guy is trying to use the idea of a general theory or whatnot to try to disprove that, special relativity has actual real world applications. The important thing to know here is that special relativity passed tests and is able to accurately predict things that happen in our reality. But he wants to write it off as just another theory and that it hasn't been 100% proven. I don't know why he put the Jesuits took him from zero to hero. I feel like this kind of feeds into some kind of conspiracy theory thing.
Airy's failure was an experiment that proved that the heavenly bodies are in motion, while we are not, using telescopes with water. Telescopes have to be very slightly tilted to get the starlight going down the axis of the tube because the Earth's speed around the sun. Airy filled the telescope with water that greatly slowed down the speed of the light inside the telescope and found that he did not have to change the angle of the telescope. This showed that the starlight was already coming in at the correct angle, so that no change was needed. This demonstrated that it was the stars moving relative to a stationary Earth, and not the fast orbiting Earth moving relative to the comparatively stationary stars. If it was the telescope moving, he would have had to change the angle.
So again, just like with the Michelson-Morley experiment, he is misrepresenting the experiment that he's mentioning, because this was again to try to prove an ether existed. Like I said before, they thought that the ether was the medium through which light moved. And the whole idea behind the experiment was you fill the telescope up with water, forcing the light to travel through a different medium, and you would see a difference. But it failed to do this. That's why it's called Airy's failure. It doesn't prove that we're on a stationary Earth or anything like that. All it does is disprove that an ether exists.
Another strange fact I'd never considered is the fact that airplanes would have to do all sorts of maneuvers just to land on a surface that's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour in one direction. It would simply be impossible for them to land, and wouldn't they fly faster to their location if flying against the spin of the ball? This crazy mess does not work, and it's far from what is real and what we see and observe. In fact, flight simulations always use a flat, non-rotating Earth to train pilots, and the training of these pilots is extremely important for the safety of you, myself, and many, many more. The flight simulation is further explained in detail in Edward Henry's book, The Greatest Lie on Earth, proof that our world is not a moving globe.
Okay, so this last facet of information that he has here is just utterly wrong. It makes sense considering that he totally shucks general relativity and special relativity for an explanation of our reality and how objects move in relation to each other. As far as I can tell, flight simulators do actually account for the spinning of the globe. They would have to. They also account for the curvature. If you notice any flight paths that you take, they're usually in an arc, because those are actually the shortest route to a destination rather than straight paths. So no need to worry about the airplanes in the air. None of them are going to crash or anything like that, like he depicted on his little picture here. Thank you, Professor Stick, for allowing me to join your video today. I hope that I provided some really good information, and I hope that I didn't screw up too much. I will see you heathens later.
Thanks to Godless Engineer for explaining all of that. If you like what you saw, definitely go to his channel to check out his other content. The link is in the description. He does a variety of topics just like me, ranging from religion to flat earth to even politics. And he's honestly one of the funniest guys on YouTube, so you won't regret it. Thanks again, GE.
Number 4. Water. The nature of water is always flat when left unmanipulated. It always finds its level. It never curves or bends.
Yeah, I'm getting awfully tired of that argument with the flat water. I'll put it simply here. There's nothing that says that water remains flat when undisturbed. Water always fills its container in respect to the direction of gravity. Since the Earth is so big, of course when you have just like a cup or a swimming pool, undisturbed water is going to feel like it's flat. But over large areas like oceans, water will indeed curve around the surface of the Earth. Since when did you flat earthers ever get a chance to view water from such a distant perspective in order to deduce that it's always flat? Your claim is based on absolutely nothing. So instead of making these claims, I suggest you to join the workforce.
The only time it does so is with what's called surface tension, and surely surface tension doesn't have waves like our oceans do. Number 5. Horizon always rises to eye level. No matter what height an observer on the Earth will rise to, the horizon will keep on rising to eye level, which is impossible on any size ball whatsoever.
The thing about flat earthers is that they don't fundamentally understand the round Earth model. See, the Earth is big as fuck. In order for what you said to be true, the Earth would have to be quite tiny. If you can see the horizon noticeably drop just by traveling to cloud level, then the Earth would have to be many, many times smaller than it actually is now.
With the enormous amount of others coming awake to the globe deception, They are launching many more high-altitude balloons to see what we can find out on our own.
Instead, how about you actually buckle down in a rocket and we'll fly you off to space? Actually, don't do that. If flat earthers didn't exist, my channel would be dead. Your bullshit only makes me stronger. Anyway, that's it for today. Don't forget to check out Godless Engineer on your way out. Peace.